Goose fat. Oh, it's delicious, but it's not good for you. It's not good for you because it's just fat and it's incredibly high in calories and you don't really need goose fat in your diet. But it is delicious, so I'm going to fry some eggs in it because it's Christmas. Whilst I'm doing that, let's do a voiceover about different kinds of fat. Is it true that saturated fat in particular is really bad for you? Let's just eat the goose fat. All fats that we eat are a combination of saturated fat and unsaturated fat. The difference is due to the chemical bonding of the fat molecules themselves. I wouldn't worry about it too much. How can you tell? Well, a good rule of thumb is that saturated fats tend to be more solid, unsaturated fats tend to be more liquid. Within the unsaturated fats, you've got polyunsaturates and monounsaturates. I wouldn't worry about that too much for now. The thing that is worth mentioning briefly is that some processed unsaturated fats can be trans fats. Trans fats aren't good for you. We'll come back to that a little bit later. There were a few old studies that basically showed that reducing the amount of saturated fat in your diet and replacing it with unsaturated fat was good for you. It looked like it would reduce your blood pressure, your cholesterol, reduce the chances of you having a heart attack and a stroke, and be good for you. Now, there have been some new studies done over the last few years, and people have gone back to look at those old studies again a bit more, and it's not always been that clear. There have been some big studies that haven't shown a difference between saturated and unsaturated fat. There have been some that have shown that swapping saturated fat for unsaturated fat can drop your cholesterol in your body, but then that hasn't translated to improving the health of your heart. So what do we actually make of this? Some studies have shown one thing, some have shown another. What do we do? What do I eat? Well, one thing that's clear is that swapping the amount of saturated fat for unsaturated fat isn't bad for you. So swapping saturated fat for unsaturated fat isn't going to do you any harm. It probably can reduce your cholesterol. Whether that actually goes on to reduce the risk of you having a heart attack is a little bit trickier to say. It could well be that dropping the saturated fat does reduce that risk and is good for you. But it could be that there's more going on there, that people who eat more saturated fats are more likely to eat more processed foods, more likely to eat the nitrates and nitrites that we know are not good for you. Do less exercise and do less of the things that you need to do to improve the health of your heart more generally. The last thing worth mentioning is that trans fats are bad for you. If you eat trans fats, then you are more likely to have a heart attack. Trans fats are something that are produced in certain processing of unsaturated fats in margarine. It is worth taking a look at that because it is worth cutting trans fats out of your diet. If you're swapping saturated fat for unsaturated fat that contains trans fats, then that's not going to do you good. Overall, it still looks like a Mediterranean diet is the best for your heart. It's probably worth bringing down the amount of saturated fat you're eating, but you don't necessarily need to vilify it. It's probably more important to be aware of your diet as a whole and that you're not eating too much, that you're doing plenty of exercise, not drinking too much. All the other stuff that you probably already know that isn't related to goose fat. So what's the moral of the story for goose fat? Well, it contains more saturated fat than vegetable oil, but less saturated fat than lard. Goose fat's probably marginally better for you than lard, but it probably would be better to be using oil. Having said that, you're probably better off not frying stuff in the first place. I'd be much better having a boiled egg. Anyway, that's more than enough for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like. Let me know what you think about goose fat. Share the videos, subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow.